Every time a new Star Wars project drops, you can set your watch to it. The discourse begins, the debates flare up, and suddenly the conversation isn't about story or characters, it's about inclusivity. Fans argue that the franchise is being ruined, others argue it is being enriched, and somewhere in between the actual story gets lost. It has become the new battleground of the galaxy. On the surface, it seems like a fair question. Star Wars has been around for nearly 50 years, and the cast of characters has never looked more diverse. But for some fans, that change feels forced, like the studio is more interested in ticking boxes than telling stories. For others, it feels like progress, a natural evolution of a saga that was always about different voices uniting against tyranny. Both sides shout, but neither side is really addressing the core issue. Because here's the thing, Star Wars has always been inclusive. Princess Leia was a revolutionary female hero in the 70s. Lando was one of the coolest characters in the original trilogy. The prequels gave us Jedi and clones from every corner of the galaxy. The Clone Wars expanded that diversity even more. Inclusivity isn't new to Star Wars, it's part of its DNA. So why is it suddenly controversial now? The answer is simple. Storytelling. When characters are well written, nobody complains about their identity. Ahsoka is beloved, Mon Mothma is respected. Finn could have been iconic if handled properly. But when characters are shallow, inconsistent or sidelined, fans blame inclusivity instead of the actual problem. It's not about who the character is, it's about how they're written. And bad writing will sink any character, no matter how inclusive. That's why blaming inclusivity misses the point entirely. It lets studios off the hook for weak plots, shallow arcs, and lazy execution. It creates a culture war that distracts from the real conversation. Why aren't Star Wars stories as strong as they used to be? Representation doesn't ruin a franchise, mediocrity does. And the sooner we admit that, the better off Star Wars will be. In this video, we're going to break down why Star Wars has always thrived on diversity, how Disney sometimes misuses inclusivity as a corporate shield, and why blaming representation is missing the real culprit behind the galaxy's struggles: bad storytelling. When people argue about Star Wars today, the word inclusivity gets thrown around like it is the root of all problems. Every time a new character, who is a woman, a person of colour, or someone breaking from the old archetypes is introduced, the online debates start. Is Disney pushing an agenda? Is representation ruining the galaxy far, far away? Or are fans just overreacting? The irony is that Star Wars has always been built on inclusivity. Aliens, droids, smugglers, Jedi from countless worlds. Diversity has been baked into this universe since 1977. The problem is not representation itself, it's how it has been handled in the modern era. Think back to the originals. You had Princess Leia, a sharp-tongued leader who was never reduced to a damsel. You had Lando Calrissian, a black man introduced in the early 80s as a suave and powerful figure. You had Chewbacca, a literal alien co-pilot whose bond with Han Solo was as strong as any friendship in cinema. The galaxy always thrived on being a melting pot, and no one complained because the storytelling was solid. Inclusivity worked when it felt natural to the story. The prequels doubled down on that idea. Mace Windu was one of the most respected Jedi Masters. Padme was a young queen leading her people in a crisis. Clones were given identities and cultures that made them distinct. And aliens from every corner of the galaxy populated the Senate. George Lucas never shied away from showing Star Wars as a diverse galaxy, but he made it feel like a feature rather than a marketing bullet point. That distinction matters. Where fans started to push back was not when diverse characters appeared, but when it felt like the characters themselves were half-baked. Take Rose Tico in The Last Jedi. There was nothing wrong with introducing a new perspective from a maintenance worker, but the character was underwritten and saddled with a subplot that went nowhere. Instead of feeling like meaningful inclusivity, it felt like box ticking, and audiences noticed. The same issue plagued Reva in Obi-Wan Kenobi. A powerful Force user, portrayed by a talented actress, yet written inconsistently with motivations that never landed. Fans who criticised the character were often dismissed as bigots, but in reality many simply wanted stronger writing. The character deserved depth, but the execution left her flat. This is where the debate gets toxic, because shallow storytelling gets defended under the banner of inclusivity rather than improved. Andor, on the other hand, shows how it can be done right. The cast is diverse, representing countless backgrounds and identities, but no one complains because the writing is airtight. Characters like Luthen, Mon Mothma, and Bix feel essential to the story, and their representation enriches the narrative rather than distracting from it. This proves inclusivity isn't the problem. Lazy execution is. The Mandalorian also illustrates this balance. Cara Dune, Fennec Shand, Bo-Katan, and Koska Reeves are all strong female characters, but they work because they are given arcs, flaws, and moments of triumph. Nobody remembers them as token insertions because the writing treated them like real people. Inclusivity thrives when it is rooted in storytelling, not when it is pasted on top of it. The truth is, fans are not rejecting diversity in Star Wars. They are rejecting shallow characters. If you give the galaxy well-written heroes and villains who happen to represent different identities, people will embrace them. If you give audiences bland archetypes defended only by the shield of representation, they will push back. And blaming the audience for noticing is missing the point entirely. The second angle is about how Disney handles inclusivity not as storytelling, but as marketing. Representation sells well in press releases, it looks good on posters, and it creates headlines. But when inclusivity is used as a shield for shallow writing, it backfires. Fans feel like they are being pandered to rather than respected. And instead of bringing people together, it divides them further. Take the rollout of The Rise of Skywalker. Much was made about background representation, yet the story itself was a structural mess. Instead of delivering meaningful character arcs, Disney leaned into surface-level gestures that felt hollow. Inclusivity, as marketing only works if the foundation is solid, otherwise it feels like window dressing on a broken house. Fans did not reject representation, they rejected the lack of depth beneath it. This problem repeats across the franchise. When criticism of new characters arises, Disney sometimes deflects by framing all pushback as prejudice. While prejudice certainly exists in fandom spaces, not every critique is rooted in that. Often it is about weak writing, inconsistent characterization, or wasted potential. By lumping all criticism together, Disney avoids accountability while alienating fans who simply want stronger stories. Consider the difference with Andor again. That show did not need press releases about diversity because the representation was baked into the story organically. Nobody questioned whether the cast was inclusive because the characters were compelling. By contrast, when a character feels like they were added only to check a box, the audience senses it instantly. Authenticity matters, and Star Wars works best when representation is a byproduct of good storytelling rather than the goal itself. This dynamic is not unique to Star Wars, but it hits harder here because the franchise has always been about inclusion in a larger sense. Aliens, droids, smugglers, and outcasts banding together against tyranny is inclusivity at its core. So when modern projects present representation as something revolutionary, fans scratch their heads. Star Wars has been inclusive from the beginning. The only difference now is that the marketing calls attention to it. And when inclusivity is treated as a shield, it undermines the characters themselves. Rose, Reva, and Holdo could all have been powerful additions to the saga. Instead, they became symbols of controversy because Disney relied on their identities to carry weight rather than giving them stories that earned it. That is unfair to the actors, unfair to the characters, and unfair to the audience. Humour can even be found in how obvious some of these decisions look. When a character exists purely to fill a quota, it is about as subtle as a stormtrooper trying to hit a target. Everyone notices, everyone laughs, and nobody takes it seriously. That is not representation, that is corporate checkbox storytelling. The real tragedy is that inclusivity, when done well, can elevate Star Wars to new heights. Imagine a series diving into Jedi from across the galaxy, each with unique cultures and perspectives. Imagine a rebellion story told from the point of view of alien worlds rarely seen on screen. These stories could expand the saga in profound ways, but only if they are built on substance rather than surface. The third angle is the most important. Inclusivity is not ruining Star Wars. Weak storytelling is. Blaming representation for the franchise's struggles is like blaming the paint job on a sinking ship. It is missing the structural problems that actually matter. And if fans and studios keep pointing fingers at the wrong target, Star Wars risks losing what has always made it special. When people say inclusivity is ruining the saga, what they often mean is that they dislike how characters are being written. Rey, for example, was divisive not because she was a woman, but because her arc felt inconsistent and underdeveloped. Finn was wasted not because he was black, but because the sequels sidelined him after setting him up as a major player. These are writing failures, not representation failures. The actors and identities were never the problem. The Clone Wars proves this point perfectly. That series introduced a massive roster of diverse characters, from Ahsoka to Satine to countless clone personalities. Fans loved them because they were given depth, arcs, and meaningful roles in the story. Nobody cared about their gender or background, they cared about their writing. Star Wars thrives when inclusivity is invisible, when the focus is on story rather than identity. Andor proves it again in live action. Its cast is full of different perspectives, but no one ever stops to label it. Instead, we get Luthen's monologues, Mon Mothma's sacrifices, Cassian's growth, and Bix's struggles. The writing is so strong that representation never feels like a stunt. It feels like part of the tapestry. That is the difference between inclusivity enriching the saga and inclusivity being blamed for bad writing. The danger of blaming inclusivity is that it creates a culture war that distracts from the real issues. Instead of demanding stronger stories, fans waste energy arguing about whether diversity itself belongs in Star Wars. That is a pointless debate, because diversity has always been part of the galaxy. The real debate should be about why studios keep giving us underwritten characters and recycled plots. That is what is actually ruining the franchise. And here is where sarcasm writes itself. If inclusivity were really the problem, then we should all hate Lando, Mace, Leia, Ahsoka, and every alien from Chewbacca to Admiral Akbar. But nobody does. Those characters are beloved because they were written with care. The proof has been in front of us for decades, yet somehow the discourse ignores it. It is also worth pointing out that blaming inclusivity gives studios an easy out. If they can frame all criticism as bigotry, they never have to answer for poor creative choices. That is convenient for them, but destructive for the fans who want real accountability. The only way forward is to separate representation from writing quality and judge characters by the same standard, regardless of who they are. The truth is, inclusivity should be Star Wars' greatest strength. It reflects the central theme of the saga, that unity across difference can defeat tyranny. But when mishandled, it becomes a scapegoat for failures that have nothing to do with diversity. Fans deserve better, and Star Wars deserves better.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.